you are at Lake Rant, where I rant about whatever my $10 a month plus patrons want me to rant about. You can get one of these by being one of those. This one's for Gary Always, who says, from your perspective, where does each PCP member land on your autism chart? Do you think they would assess their own level differently than you would? Personally, I think Jesse is a solid 1 who takes excursions into 2 when it comes to things like wrestling, but easily the least autistic among you. I think Ben and Nate are probably 2s, but they go hard into level 3 whenever they're talking to each other. What do you think? Is anyone in the PCP at level 0? Is anyone greater than level 4? Well, I very much disagree with you on your assessments of the PCP members. Let me go ahead and open up the PCP channel so that I can make sure I get everybody. Do I think that they would label themselves the same way that I would label them? It depends. I mean, ideally, my chart works well enough that if you have a good enough understanding of it, you shouldn't disagree with your placement. If you do, then it might be that I don't know you well enough that we would have to hash through it. I think that Jesse in particular, I think his contention would be that it's not autism, which it's not really. Like, the way that this chart is set up, it's more about, it's not about level 1, you are now autism. Like, I think that most of what would be, most of people who would be actually diagnosed with autism would fall 4 or below, if not all the way, even 3, maybe, but, like, you'd have to have, like, more of the traits to really approach that kind of diagnosis. So I'm going to go down the list. We got best guy ever. I'm putting him at, like, a strong 3 to a light 4, possibly more autistic than I am, honestly. I mean, talking to the guy, his ability to get truly mired in the details is astonishing. He is somebody who, has to really obsessively check his way down to every minute specificity. I don't know if that's what makes someone more autistic, but I think it's possible that. Well, let me talk a little bit about learned behaviors first of all, because as an autistic person, it's not that you are incapable of ever communicating with people or understanding people exactly. It's more about the strategies that you develop. There are people who are severely autistic who can communicate better than some people who aren't because of the fact that they are specifically focused on communicating. So someone like me or Nate, both of us are people who I think were way more awkward, had way more difficulty communicating growing up, and our ability to do it now is not predicated on having a natural understanding of anything. It's predicated on recognizing it as something that needs to be worked on in order to accomplish, and then setting out to do that. So if Nate doesn't come off as autistic, I think it's because he's put a lot of effort into not coming off autistic. I mean, if you hear him talk about when he was in high school, when he was wearing like a Vampire Hunter D cosplay essentially and talking to no one because he thought it would make him cool, that's some pretty severe autism right there. So, I'm going to put him at a strong 3 to a light 4, around the same range as I am, but he does seem a little bit more particular even than me. Ben Saint, Ben is a hard one to judge. I mean, I might put him around the same location just because of his interests. Certainly go down to the real nitty-gritty in particular. But I don't know. He might be less. It's hard to say. I really can't judge Ben that well because I don't always understand his rationale behind why he acts the way he does or says the things he does. Ben's a tough nut to crack, I guess. I don't know. I'd have to hear his opinion. I really want to talk about it with him, because I've talked about it with Nate, and I think I don't know if he would agree with my placement of him, but I think he agrees with the logic behind it. Jesse, I would put around the same place as myself, maybe less. Somewhere in the 3 range. I mean, his obsession with meta, his ability to see everything from this pulled back metatextual perspective, I think, well, it could be that he's such a big picture thinker that he's even less of an autist. I mean, one of the things that I'm kind of working towards with this theory, because I heard someone talking about dyslexia, and particularly the talk that talks about how it is opposite from autism, postulates that people with dyslexia have the ability to sort of recognize bigger picture stuff more easily, whereas autists tend to fixate on minute details more easily. And Jesse has always been somebody who sort of sees the big picture first and then has to be asked to explain the details, whereas someone like me might get lost in the weeds and act like it's a revelation when I finally see the big picture. So maybe Jesse's a lot less than I give him credit for, even if he does have that like that insane data bank memory where he can just pull like massive amounts of history from all kinds of different mediums. I mean, you saying that he's like more autistic about wrestling, I don't think that he's any more like knowledgeable about wrestling than he is about like video games or about comic books or any of these other things that he's talked about in the same depth and been able to recall. But again, he does have a better ability of recognizing big picture kind of concepts than most of us do. So I don't know. I'd have to, again, do more research and talk to him about what he thinks. Hypocrite, he's really hard to place. I don't know where I'd put him. I'd be interested in his opinion. I don't know enough about, I guess, his tastes and, because, you know, I feel like he's somebody who is very particular about like what he gets into and what he likes, and I don't know what the underlying logic is behind all of it a lot of the time. So I'd be interested to know what he thinks before I tried to give him one. Mage, I don't really think I could place her at all. Again, I'd have to know way more about her taste in particular. Tom is probably less autism than I am. He's probably just like a level 2 or so, you know. I think it's fair to consider Tom like around level 2. Maybe that's why people think he comes off as the most level-headed or normal out of the members of the group. But you know, I think he has more regular tastes, more regular emotive states than most of us do. The Devu I would put at a 5 for sure. Definitely level 5. He has a very in-depth and particular way of looking at absolutely everything. Everything he thinks about has to be broken down to just like the deepest fathoms of detail before he can move on, you know. He has that stuck property that you see as you go further down the autism spectrum. The you know, the feeling of like having to work over this thing over and over and over again before you can move on, you know. And I mean, you could look at his interests. I think they align pretty well with the stuff I said about level 5 on the tier list. So yeah, I'd put him pretty firmly in the level 5 zone. And then Munchie might only be like level 2, honestly, maybe 3. It's hard to say. Again, I'd have to talk to him about it and know more about his tastes. Munchie is such an odd person in general. He's so different from anybody else I've ever known that, you know, it's hard for me to just ascribe it something like autism. Like, the basis of this autism chart is more about recognizing patterns in behavior of people. It's, you know, I've noticed that people, you know, who are more autistic tend to like this, this, and this, and people who are less tend to like this, this, and this, but they share these qualities. Munchie is not definable enough in those parameters for me to easily place him. So again, somebody I'd have to talk to, hear his opinion, to really know where to place it. But yeah, that's more or less my thoughts on it. I, of course, have put myself at 3.4, as you may have heard before. So, yeah, right smack in the middle of the whole chart.